I'm Al Hunt.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to Donald Trump, this time, you're... it's too easy. Happy National Waffle Iron Day, sports fans. Today it's our special Most Interesting Man in the World episode. So who is the most interesting man in the world today? Could be Joe Biden, could be, yes, Donald Trump. But let's start with two new candidates about to jump into the presidential race. First up is Christie, announcing tomorrow, who teased his entry with an emotional video about how his mother's death inspired his campaign slogan, telling it like it is.
My mom got diagnosed with cancer, and all of you have lost a family member to cancer. You understand what this scene is like. She grabbed my hand and she said, "Christopher, there's nothing left unsaid between us." It was an incredibly powerful moment in my life. I know if my mom were still alive, she would say to me, "I taught you that in a trusting relationship, you don't hold anything back."
Second up is John Kasich, who teed up his campaign on Face the Nation yesterday by going hyper-local about his record as governor of Ohio.
I didn't travel outside the state. I didn't go out and politic. What I wanted to do was fix Ohio. So we went from $8 billion in the hole to a $2 billion surplus to a balanced budget to the largest tax cuts in the country and growing 360,000 jobs with everyone having a chance. Now I can go out and tell my story, and hopefully the polls will rise. We'll see.
FYI, we will be streaming Christie's announcement tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. But Al, between these two men, Christie and John Kasich, who is the most interesting man in the world and who's more likely to be the Republican nominee?
Kasich. Look, John, as you know, Christie can fill up a room in every which way like no one else in American politics. But John Kasich has a really compelling story. He both substantively and politically in Ohio. He's got a wacky side, as you also know, and sometimes he's undisciplined. But if he can really tell that story and keep some discipline, he's got a real shot to make a mark. Christie had problems before Bridgegate. He was a real question whether Jersey travels. Rudy Giuliani is the closest parallel. He didn't. But Bridgegate, the best story you can make out of it, John, is that, hey, I appointed some corrupt and incompetent lieutenants, and I had no idea what they were doing. I don't really think you want to burnish that image.
That's not a very good story, Al, if that's the best story you can tell. Look, I have been bearish on Christie for a while, and it has something to do with Bridgegate, but it has more to do with 9 credit rating downgrades, an unemployment rate higher than the national average, basically zero growth in New Jersey. There is no story to tell there after having won what he said were big budget and pension reform victories in his first term. But I have to say, John Kasich, if he can get through this nomination fight, he would be a very compelling candidate. I think he's going to have a very hard time in today's Republican Party, given a number of his apostasies and, as you pointed out, his ADD.
Yep. No, I agree. Kasich would be maybe the most formidable, along with Rubio, if they got the nomination. Getting there, he does not have a pathway as easy as a number of other candidates.
He is, again, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. But if he could, he's going to have to get into those debates, and starting this late, that's going to be hard for him, too. So we'll see. All right, Al.
Sorry, John. Within 17 hours, the Washington Post pumped out investigative pieces on both Jeb Bush's family connections and business background, and Marco Rubio's personal wealth. Credit on both double byline stories goes to Tom Hamburger, who also might be the most interesting man in the world. John, who's got a bigger problem, Jeb or Marco?
Well, on the basis of these pieces, Al, I would actually say that Jeb has a bigger problem. I read both these pieces carefully. The Jeb Bush one was a much longer takeout. The Marco Rubio piece was considerably shorter. One dealt with Jeb's business background. The other deals with Rubio's accumulation of wealth. The Rubio piece seemed to basically say he worked as a lobbyist. But there seemed to be no real, not only not a smoking gun, but there wasn't really anything, no real there other than the fact that working as a lobbyist seems a little untoward. In the Bush piece, you've got him in bed with a lot of former business associates convicted of crimes, 5 of them, I believe. One still is an international fugitive on fraud charges, and he's got even his friends saying that he worked with a lot of deadbeats and crooks. I think there's judgment questions there, and also some questions about whether he unduly used his influence in certain cases.
John, I agree with you on this. The Marco story was, yeah, he made a bunch of money as a lobbyist. So what? If there's more there, then we'll see. The Jeb problem is that he really did have some really sleazy business associates. He may not have done anything, but they were really bad guys. I think maybe 2 of them are in the land. The political problem it causes him, for his critics in the party will say, if he runs against Hillary now, not only will we forfeit the dynasty and the generational issue, we'll forfeit the ethics issue, too. And that's a real problem for him.
The opening anecdote in that piece dealing with some Nigerian businessmen and him going over when he was much younger, talking about his relationship with his father then sending a letter talking about how pleased he was. It's all that was it's a little hinky and doesn't look that great for Jeb Bush. All right, Donald Trump is out at NBC. And the network says it will not show his Miss USA and Miss Universe pageants because Trump called Mexican immigrants rapists and other bad things. Some people think Trump was just in the race to pump up his TV ratings. So now that he's off the network, Al, is it more or less likely that the Donald will stay in the race, at least until Iowa?
Well, I've never seen the light and really fully appreciated the virtue of the Donald's candidacy, John, and I think it's an exercise in self-promotion. But what I don't know is, does this make it more likely he'll drop out because he doesn't have this show to promote, or does the Donald figure, hey, if I stay in, I'll get a couple more gigs just as good?
It's an interesting question. You could I think the conventional wisdom is this: he's got no TV career going. He's more likely to stay in because what else is he going to do? I wonder, though, at this point, if there's no financial return on the backside, if there's no ratings to ramp up, those are the ways. The previous theories had always been, well, he's just pumping his TV ratings. That would lead to more money in his coffers. Now, if he runs and he's got no TV career, it's all just net outflow. He's just writing check after check after check, and I don't know how Trump will feel about that if it gets to be September, October, November, and he's not moving in the polls, and he's writing all those, seeing all all those dollars flow out of his bank account.
Well, we'll find out if he's really as rich as he says he is. If he is, then it won't matter much. But if he's got a cash flow problem, then I think you're probably right that Donald will suddenly find greener pastures.
Al, I know you're not a big fan of Donald Trump and you don't appreciate his candidacy, but it is
I like his hair.
It is striking, though. I think you and I will agree about this. It is striking the degree to which he is basically repackaging the Pat Buchanan campaign of 1996, and I think that has as much to do with some of his polling strength in the last week or so than just his mere celebrity and his name recognition.
Yeah, I do, too. John, the Wall Street Journal reports that before he died, Beau Biden asked his father to please run for president. And the vice president's other son, Hunter, also wants Joe to run in 2016. Now, Biden has reportedly set a deadline to decide around early August. John, is Joe Biden going to get in?
Well, I think this is a case, Al, where it's with Joe Biden, it's head versus heart. The head says no. The heart, I think, increasingly says yes. And I think both of those pieces of reportage in the Wall Street Journal I know to be true. That both Beau Biden wanted his dad to run, talked to his dad about running before he died. Hunter Biden wants his dad to run. Family means more than anything to Joe Biden. And I think if the pull of family has got him thinking more seriously about running right now than he has in many months. I don't necessarily think he's going to run, but right now I think he's closer to running than he has been in all of 2015.
John, I agree, but here's why I think he won't run. Joe Biden is the happiest warrior we've ever known in politics, at least since Hubert Humphrey. He's a joyful candidate. He's upbeat. He's Joe. And when you look at him today, and we all can understand why, I saw him at that funeral in South Carolina on television. I saw him a couple other times. He's a sad man. He is a man who's grief-stricken. And I don't think a presidential campaign is really going to be a catharsis for that. So I think he's tempted, and you're probably right. He's closer than he was before. But I think in the end, the head will win out.
I think that's probably right, Al. And the other thing is, I talked to him about it a fair amount a few years ago, and there's no doubt that having run twice and failed badly both times he ran before, he does not want to end his career with another ignominious failure on the presidential campaign trail. And I think enough of his head tells him that Hillary Clinton is a steamroller, and he doesn't really want to be the guy who lost 3 times badly. I think the head in that case probably will overrule the heart, but boy, the heart's tugging him towards the trail, I think, right now in some ways. All right, coming up, weed, marijuana, Mary Jane. and a conservative Republican who loves it. We'll be right back. Our guest tonight is Dana Rohrabacher, a Republican congressman from the 48th District of California, and Ronald Reagan's former speechwriter. Congressman, thanks for joining us from Irvine. We know you're headed out to Denver, where you're going to give the lunchtime keynote tomorrow at the Cannabis Business Summit. Tell us what you're going to say in that speech tomorrow.
Well, actually, I want to make sure that people understand that the true issues at hand when we're dealing with medical marijuana especially, but also personal use of marijuana, that these are things that make us go to our basic foundations of what we believe in. What are our principles? And those are principles, I think, that conservatives like myself understand or should understand. I mean, we've been talking a lot about doctor-patient relationships, well, especially in terms of Obamacare, and that should be a doctor should be able to prescribe something, especially in a state that legalizes medical marijuana. We believe in the 10th Amendment. We believe in states' rights, but and our founding fathers never believed in the criminal justice system to be run by the federal government. That should always have been a part of the state and local government, according to our founding fathers. So there's a lot of things, and individual freedom, not to mention that. But so there's a lot of things that I believe that are coming together now in the issue on marijuana issues that can bring conservative Republicans together with people on the other side of the spectrum, or at least people who thought they are on the other side of the spectrum, to get something done about this enormous waste of our resources, meaning spending money that we don't have, borrowing it from China, taking it out of the criminal justice process in order to prevent someone from smoking a weed. How stupid is that?
Congressman, you have a personal reason for, I know you've been as strong an advocate for medical marijuana as anyone on the right or left. What is it that made you an advocate? You have a personal story that got you into this issue, right?
Well, first of all, it's philosophical. I am someone who believes in limited government, and I believe in individual freedom. And those people who use those expressions, I don't think many of them have taken it very seriously, and I do, and I have for my entire life. And so that's number one. But number two, I understand some of the sorrow that's created in people when they say we're going to arrest someone and try to help them, and that will in some way stop people from using marijuana and be better for them and better for the country. That's just not true. We are wasting billions of dollars that could go into trying to confront rapists and murderers and terrorists, and instead it's going after trying to prevent someone from smoking a weed. And number one, that's a waste of money. That's number one motive for me, because we have to try to find a way today to balance the budget. But also I can identify with young people. If they get arrested when they're 21, 22 years old, smoking a joint, and they end up with a felony conviction, well, now people in the upper middle income and upper income, that doesn't destroy their lives. But in so many places in America, the young people, they get a criminal record that early because their family can't afford a big lawyer to get them off, and it ruins their life. And it causes a much, in the long run, it costs so much more.
Congressman, we did a poll at Bloomberg several months ago, and 58% of the people said they thought marijuana would be legal within 20 years. 32% said no. For that to happen, can it just continue to be on a state-by-state basis, or will the federal government have to step in to legalize it?
Well, I think the best approach is going state by state, because our founding fathers wanted criminal justice and this type of legislation to be done at the state level. Well, we got way out of whack when the federal government stepped in and decided it would make the decisions for the people across the United States as to what their criminal justice positions would be on marijuana and things such as that. So if we got out of our liberty and our control of limited government, got out of whack because the federal government came in and superseded the states, I think we can back out of this the same way. Out of it the same way.
I was just going to quickly ask you, are Christie and Marco Rubio making a mistake in saying they wouldn't permit it if they were president?
Yes, they are, dramatically. The fact is that Even most Republicans can see what a waste of money this is when you're borrowing money, and a third of our budget is borrowed from China and elsewhere, and you borrow that and ignoring more severe crimes and then putting people in jail for smoking a weed is ridiculous, and they're hurting themselves. The American people understand that now. By the way, I'm in a conservative district. I'm from a conservative district, and I can tell you I haven't lost one vote, and I probably picked up 10% of the vote from people who say, well, Dana really is an open-minded person, because I have a conservative voting record.
Congressman Rohrabacher, I know Rand Paul's going to be out there doing a little fundraiser, I think, in Denver. I want you to make sure to say hello to him and give him some advice about going even further than he's gone already on this issue. Thank you very much for taking time. After the break,
thank you.
We're taking out our beakers and our Bunsen burners. We're going inside the Victory Lab with Sasha Eisenberg after these words. When the going and the politics get tough, sometimes we need to call in the biggest brain in the business. He's part political genius, part savvy journalist, and part mad scientist. This is Inside the Victory Lab with Sasha P. Eisenberg. Sasha, it's great to have you here again today. You have a brilliant piece that you've written on BloombergPolitics.com that we want to deconstruct with you a little bit today. It's about the top-tier Republican candidates and how they're approaching the data wars in 2016. So let's talk about all three of those big Republican candidates and how they're doing this in the form of scientific equations. Let's talk first about Scott Walker and what the problem is that Scott Walker is trying to solve with his data operation, the problem that he's trying to solve for represented here as X.
Yeah, and so for all of these, it's early in the process, obviously, and there's not a lot of transparency about what campaigns are doing with data and analytics. We can start to look at the teams they're putting together, what those people are good at, and try to devise not just how they're going to go about solving them, but the problems they're trying to answer. In this case, Scott Walker's solving for X. He's focused on the Iowa electorate. Rand Paul's going out and talking about expanding the electorate in early states. Scott Walker's very focused on the conventional Republican primary electorate, but in such a large field where we expect a lot of fluid movement, his job is going to be tracking that movement day to day. Old voters, white voters, the core of the Iowa constituency, and Iowa. But the point is individual movement day to day and figuring out how to model and measure it so that when the caucuses come around, they know exactly who their ones and twos are, and they know how to get them to the polls.
Right. So X in this case for him is movement, right?
Yeah, movement at an individual level, not an aggregate level.
Right.
You know, somebody's going to win Iowa with 30,000 votes. Right. They want to make sure they have the names of those 30,000 people, and that they know who they need to keep on mobilizing, who they should be persuading, and also the movement on the other second-tier candidates could be important because they're going to want to block somebody else's movement to second or third place, possibly.
But he is not like a Rand Paul thinking about how to get new caucus participants in, trying to identify new voters. He's looking for the traditional voters, and therefore watching where they're moving is the most important.
That's right. And the most important thing on Mark Stevenson's resume, he was one of Joni Ernst's early hires in the Iowa primary.
That's a good hire.
He knows the electorate. He knows the Republican primary electorate, and they're going to go to war with the electorate they have, not the electorate that they wish they had.
Marco Rubio, our second top-tier Republican candidate. What is Marco Rubio solving for Sasha?
The Rubio campaign is making a big show about trying to do this on the cheap. They seem to have a leaner campaign, fewer staff hires. They're not necessarily putting together as big a staff team. They've hired a firm called Optimus Consulting. Their specialty is running these randomized experiments, but the way they sell themselves is basically an in-house auditing firm. We'll test everything your other consultants do for a flat fee, and we'll make sure that you're not wasting money. And they like sticking a finger in the eye of media consultants, digital consultants, who they say are probably overspending, and that they can hold them accountable. So our equation here, S for small staff, and then this combination of digital media, paid voter contact, and volunteer ops, places where they think a conventional campaign might be bloated, and they think that randomized experiments can be the way that they measure whether that's effective.
Right, and so X, what they're solving for is?
How to spend less money, but better.
Okay, so that's interesting because when we think about data and analytics now, we mostly think about voters, how you're going to get votes, whether it's new voters, old voters, whatever. They're actually using data as a kind of internal function. They're trying to bring data to bear on how to run a leaner, meaner operation.
Yeah, I mean, I've written a lot about how the sort of sexy uses of data.
Yeah.
The least sexy but most widely valuable application of analytics in a campaign is basically just to cut waste. If you can figure out how to be 20% more efficient with your direct mail or your phone calls or your digital buy, just by cutting out people who might already be voting for you and not showing them ads, that means a lot. And Rubio's he knows he will not have as much money as some of his opponents.
Like
Jeb Bush.
The third person we're about to talk about, Jeb Bush.
So his big challenge is not trying to figure out how to necessarily run a campaign on the cheap, but understands that he's going to be putting a lot more money on TV than any other Republican in this field.
Because he has so much money.
Because he has so much of it.
Yeah.
There will be a scarcity problem at the end where they want to make sure everybody's going to be fighting for the same airtime in Des Moines or Charleston, and they want to make sure that they're getting in the slots that they want and that they're buying that efficiently, and that they're spreading their buy as widely as possible, but still reaching the targets that they want to reach. So the equation we have here is English and Spanish-speaking Latinos, two groups that we talk about often in the aggregate the same, but when you're buying TV, those are very different audiences. We're watching very different shows, and you want to make sure that you are buying complementarily between the two of them. And then off-the-shelf ratings and custom ratings. The firm that Jeb has brought on, Deep Root Analytics, they're the chief analytics officer of the Bush campaign is going to be this guy Alex Lundry, who started this firm, worked for Mitt Romney, and he's basically built his career now on the idea that Nielsen ratings might be good for buying Procter & Gamble ads. They're not that useful for politics because demographics are not necessarily the same as political groups. So he's created these custom ratings where basically a campaign goes and says, here are the 30,000 people we want to reach in Iowa. What shows are they watching? And rate the shows that way. Greg Abbott's campaign in Texas say that they saved $4 million in their buys last year just by buying in places where other political campaigns weren't going because the Nielsen ratings didn't tell them exactly who was watching in political terms.
All right, so that is the equation he's solving for.
Is how to make sure that this gazillions of dollars that's being spent on TV is going to the right places.
So it's interesting, just before we wrap up, just to be clear, kind of fascinating thing about this is that each of these campaigns and candidates are thinking about using data in totally different ways, for totally different purposes. You've got one focused on voters, one focused on internal operations, and the other focused on voters, but really focused more on media buying and how to do media buying in the best possible way.
Yeah, I mean, the field of data and analytics and tech have become so sophisticated in campaigns that just talking about it as you're doing data or not doing data is not the right question. Right. The real question is to look at who you're hiring and what strategic purpose they're solving for your campaign.
Sasha P. Eisenberg, the author of the Victory Lab and the eminence grease of this particular Victory Lab. Thank you for coming, and we'll be right back. We have got a brilliant piece by our polling guru, Ken Goldstein, up on our site, BloombergPolitics.com, about Bernie-mentum and the problem of demographics. Tomorrow on BloombergPolitics.com, we'll have Chris Christie. We'll be live streaming that announcement at 11 a.m. ET. I'll be here with Al Hunt. Al, in one sentence, what are you looking for tomorrow from Chris Christie's announcement?
Is he going to in any way knock anyone else in the field and really target them, John? Doubt it, but it'd be interesting if he does and who he chooses.
I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Remember, we're on twice a day at 5 and at 8. Until tomorrow, from me and Albert Reinhold Hunt Jr., I say to you, sayonara.